You know, sometimes when I listen to leaders like Rev Mantey, I get the impression that some of these leaders have forgotten that we are in a multi-party dispensation. As if they truly acknowledge the fact that we are in a multi-party dispensation, they would tamper the messages that they deliver to this country. There's no doubt, in fact, there cannot be any doubt about the fact that the foundation of a multi-party democratic system is difference and respect for difference. That whole multi-party arrangement is hinged on different. The right to be different. It frowns on uniformity. And that is one of the reasons why the current sitting president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, joined the campaign for the repeal of the criminal libel law. Indeed, the whole argument for the repeal of the criminal libel law was simply that speech and thought should not be criminalized. What Rev Mantey has done is to move a step beyond criminalization of speech and thought. He has now reached the level of the demonization of thought and speech. That's where he has reached. Way beyond the limits that the criminal libel law imposed upon us. And I feel very, very sad that we have come to this level. You know, if you look at our society, human society today and so on, religion has some prominence. And the pronouncement of religious leaders or pretending leaders of religion has consequences for all of us. In some places, the declaration of a citizen as a witch or a wizard, the consequence of that declaration is lynching to death. Lynching to death. That's how grave the comments of Right Reverend Professor Mantey is. That's how grave his comments are. In many places in the world, if you are pronounced a witch or a wizard, you are lynched to death. Rev Mantey is actually telling us that if you disagree with this government, especially on its proposal to build 111 hospitals, you should be lynched. If you go to the northern parts of this country, I'm sure you've heard about the witches' camp at Dambaga. That is the consequence of being pronounced a witch, being declared a witch or a wizard. That's the consequence. So when he was talking glibly before a rural audience, did he think about all of this? Did he think about all of this? Look, we should be fair to him, and I'm going to be very fair to him. If I believe that the foundations of our multi-party democratic system is respect for difference, then we've got to respect his views. You understand what I'm saying? Because he is also different from us. And we should not be calling on people to lynch him. He doesn't deserve to be lynched. He doesn't deserve to be consigned to a witch's camp and so on. He doesn't deserve that for being different. My real problem is the fact that with people like him, with all their titles and so on, their utterances would disturb the effort to build a democracy in our country. Their utterances are dangerous for the building of a democracy in any society. You understand? Now, what did he say? What was the context within which he spoke? The first context was that, look, this country has many health problems, and our health infrastructure cannot cope with the problems we have. Who would disagree with this? In the face of the COVID pandemic, the Ridge Hospital in Accra was designated as one of the frontline hospitals for dealing with COVID-19 and so on. We heard from doctors from the Ridge Hospital. The bed capacity for managing COVID was not up to 20 beds. In a regional hospital, one of the most modern hospitals in this country, we didn't have more than 20 beds for dealing with the COVID pandemic. Doctors in the Ridge Hospital persistently called for a dedicated outpatients department to handle COVID-19 cases. What does it take to provide a dedicated OPD for managing, COVID-19? An ordinary tent would have done. We could not erect a tent. We could not erect a tent to deal with COVID-19 cases and so on. So if he calls for improving health infrastructure and for commending those who think about improving health infrastructure, I think he's absolutely right, and we should give him that. The problem, however, is that he's not just calling for improving health infrastructure. The problem is that he's saying that nobody has a right to examine promises made by our governments in relation to the improvement of health infrastructure. And that whether what our governments are saying are feasible or not, we should just shut the hell up. What he's saying is that don't think, don't calculate, don't look at history. Accept whatever your government tells you, especially the Akufo-Addo government. That's a dangerous way to think about the development of a country. Listen, I agree with Dr. Adumaku Kisi when he says, I'm not an architect like Kodochu Mbuafu and so on, but when he says that in architecture it will be strange if you can design one structure that fits all situations. Okay? I do know that if you go travel 18 kilometers out of Accra and you get into the mountains, people who build there normally build story buildings because of the topography in the area. When you come to flat areas, you can build single-story buildings and so on because of the topography. Now we know that the topography in Ghana is not uniform, and therefore to design one structure which fits every land size, which fits, the topography everywhere, is strange. Maybe I'm exhibiting my ignorance as a non-architect, and I would accept that I'm not an architect. I don't know everything, you understand? But what Dr. Adumaku Kisi made some sense to me. What he said made some sense to me. Okay? In the same vein, I don't think that all hospitals can cost the same. Okay? If you're building a specialist psychiatric hospital, I suspect, and I only suspect, that the cost of building a specialist psychiatric hospital may be different from building a general hospital for a district. One, because the equipment which is going to go into the two hospitals would not be the same. Even the personnel you attract would not be the same. And the quality of the personnel would also determine remuneration and all kinds of things and so on. So they would never be the same. So I was surprised when His Excellency the President told us that each of the 111 hospitals was going to cost $16.7 or $16.8 million. How is that possible? Now, Rev Mantey says that anybody who asks this question must be a wizard or a witch. If you ask this simple question, whether the cost of a specialized psychiatric hospital and a general hospital must be the same or can be the same, you are a witch or you are a wizard. Be or suffer. Or suffer. Abba or suffer. Why? So you can't ask this simple question. It's incredible. The president, when he was inaugurating the Agenda 111 project, he told us that government has set aside $100 million for the project. Now, any primary school kid, Master, even our market women in Makola, those of them who have had no formal education, can divide 100 by 16.7. This is not a difficult exercise. It's a very simple arithmetic. It does not even involve multiplication. It doesn't involve multiplication. It doesn't involve addition. All it involves is division. Divide 100 by 16.7 or 16.8. If you do this exercise, Master, if you do this exercise, you become a witch or a wizard. Rev Mantey has made wizardry so simple, so easy. I mean, all you have to do is divide 100 by 16.8, and then you are a wizard. It's so easy. You understand? Because if you divide 100 by 16.8, you get 5. So what it means is that the total allocation that government has made for the building of 111 hospitals can only produce 5. Isn't it legitimate for people to be asking, so the 106 that is left, how are we going to fund it? If you do that, you are a witch. If you're a woman, you are a wizard if you are a man. Simply for making the mistake of dividing 100 by 16.8.
Gender balance.
This is really incredible. Incredible. And this is the moderator of the Presbyterian Church. And you know why that is important? My parents sent me to a Presbyterian boarding school in Eburi. And the reason why my parents sent me to a Presbyterian boarding school in Eburi was the legendary discipline that Presbyterianism imposed on children and so on. The discipline, the intellectual discipline, the social discipline and so on.
It's still there.
Listen, that was in the 1960s. In 2021, the head of that institution, which was seen as exemplary when it came to imposing intellectual discipline, when it came to imposing social discipline and so on, the head, the very head, the moderator, is reduced to this level. I'm ashamed. And I'm not the only person who is ashamed. I am sure that there are so many people in the Presbyterian Church who cannot lift their heads today because of these statements by the moderator. And the moderator is not a simple moderator. We have seen moderators whose only title was Right Reverend so and so. Today we have a moderator whose title is Right Reverend Professor. Bay.
That was a Christian council.
Bay.
Suffer.
Now, he's not just moderator of the Presbyterian Church. He's also head of the Christian Council. The Christian Council. Those people who serve on the National Peace Council. The people who are supposed to be mediating when there is conflict. The people who are supposed to be bringing us together. How is he going to function in that capacity when he has divided this country into saints, wizards, and witches? He is now going to mediate between saints, wizards, and witches? His bias is already established. As a so-called man of God, he can certainly not be on the side of witches and wizards. Ally?
In fact, true it is.
So he cannot, his bias is so established that he can no longer be a mediator and so on. Absurd. But you see, what are some of the other issues which have been raised? About a year ago, there was a functioning hospital at South Labadi in Accra. We sent bulldozers to the hospital and razed it to the ground with a promise that we're going to build an ultra-modern hospital in its place.
It can work.
Today, that place is a playground for kindergarten kids. Why? Those of us who speak tree, one of the proverbs which has been repeated throughout our lifetime is simply "Sewu nim owua shenda." Sewu nim owua shenda. This is what our elders have told us all the time. They go, they raise a whole polyclinic to the ground. Today is a playground for kids. And then they come and say, we couldn't build one hospital, one. Gudakede, one hospital. We couldn't build it at South Labadi. But we will give you 111 hospitals in 18 months. Master, that's another proverb. That's another proverb.
The old GAB for saying title.
Quatrekwa. Quatrekwa se obe mountuma. Bisanidin. Quatrekwa se obe mountuma. Bisanidin. So this quatrekwa business, if you raise it, you become a wizard or a witch. I can't believe it. Master, put that one aside. Put it aside. You know, the president cut the sword to commission this dream. Dream.
Vision.
You understand? Oh, a vision to some extent is a dream. You understand? So he cut the sword to commission this dream. My goodness. My goodness. The very spot where he stood to cut the sword for the realization of the dream. 1 year earlier, the Minister of Health has stood in the same spot and cut the sword for what? Another hospital. Not one block
has been laid.
Master, not one block has been laid there. So if you doubt all these promises, is there not a basis for the doubt? Do you become a witch or a wizard? I mean, incredible. But I haven't finished yet.
Hey.
Yes.
And then you'll buy it.
Master, I haven't finished yet. Look around the country. The other day, I heard people from Shama, the chiefs and people of Shama, on camera, lamenting that another sword was cut there for a hospital. What has happened there?
Nothing.
The place is overgrown with weeds. I heard the Queen Mother. She was almost in tears. You understand? Almost in tears. Last year, we were told that within 12 months, 88 hospitals were going to be built. Master, 88. Not one, not half, not a quarter, not 1/8, not 1/16, not 1/24 has been built.
You're doing math, though. You're not supposed to be.
Why not?
You'll be called
Today, doing maths is the equivalent of wizardry and witchery and so on, you know. None whatsoever has been built. So if people raise legitimate concerns and so on, how do they become witches and wizards? It's unbelievable. But again, let's put all these failed promises aside. We are told that this is a government of Ghana funded project. What does that mean? We are not going to borrow in order to complete the project. We are not going to look for grants from outside to complete the project. There's no private sector investment in the project. We are going to take money from government funds to build this project. 3 days ago, or 4 days ago, the Institute of Fiscal Studies gave us a briefing on the state of the Ghanaian economy. Very interesting. Now, according to the survey, according to the research, which was led by Dr. Said Bouachi, total national revenue, this is very important, because this has led to a revision of the figures that I've been using in my arguments. If you take total national revenue, it is sufficient for only 2 line items. Public sector emoluments, or, to paying government workers. Okay? And then debt servicing. 2 line items. No! Ogbekona, listen. It is not 100% of government revenue which goes into this. 121% of government revenue goes into paying only 2 line items. Which means that when the president has to go to Kumasi, the petrol in his car, we paid for it with borrowed money. That we cannot run the Flagstaff house without borrowing. That's the implication. You cannot build a gutter without borrowing.
Flying jets.
You cannot do anything in this country without borrowing. The only 2 things you can do without borrowing are debt servicing and paying government workers. Finish. So if you have this economic situation,
conundrum,
if there is this big hole in your economy, big hole, and somebody comes and says that I'm going to give you 111 hospitals, is it not legitimate to ask, where is the money coming from? Because you know the money is not there. And you know the figures I've revised. Last year, one of the deputy ministers of finance, Edu Buahini, Honorable Edu Buahini, told us that 91% of total national revenue plus grants goes into 3 items: public sector emoluments, debt servicing, and debt repayment. Okay. Now, I've revised that situation completely based on the IFS research, because the situation is more serious than the picture painted by the Deputy Minister of Finance. And those are normal. Even if you look at 91%, it's frightening. Okay? Now, what is even more frightening about these figures is that 30 years ago or thereabout, 30 years ago or thereabout, we were spending about 50% of total national revenue on debt servicing and public sector emoluments. From there to now, we have jumped from our 50% to 121%. Hey, what is happening? Now, what this tells us simply is that the monies we are borrowing are not being invested wisely. Because we borrow to create holes. We are not borrowing to engage in production which will fill the holes. And I'm really frightened. Now, the professor should have known better. I mean, professorship is not a small title. Professor is not a small title. And he should have known better than somebody like me. Perhaps he should even have known better than all of us here, and so on. His title suggests that he should be in a position to know better. And he thinks that if you raise these legitimate questions based on facts, then you are a wizard. You are a witch. God help this country. I am so scandalized. You understand? Now, there is some issue which for me is important. If you look at the drafters of the 1992 Constitution, they took pains to exempt chiefs from participation in partisan politics. There are some who disagree with them. They are not wizards and they are not witches. They have a right to disagree with the drafters of the Constitution. But there's a certain rationale there. Chiefs preside over communities in which there are different political parties and so on. If chiefs are seen to be politically partisan and partial, they themselves face the risk of destrument. They face the risk of generating instability in their communities and so on. That was the rationale. Now, these men of God, these moderators and archbishop and archangels and so on, all of them, are they sure of the political allegiance of members of their congregation? I would be surprised if today anybody can say that all the members of the Presbyterian Church are MPP. And I'd be so shocked if anybody was to tell me that all the faithful in the Anglican Church are NDC, or all the faithful in the AME Zion Church are CPP, and so on. It doesn't happen that way. Okay? So the leaders of these religious institutions have a duty to themselves and their faith to keep the faithful together in spite of their different political allegiances. They have that duty. Because if they fail to keep the faith together, if they fail to keep the faithful together in spite of their political differences and so on, they will be pulling down God's house. And in that case, when Jesus comes the second time and he picks up the whip, you remember the story in the Bible where Jesus the Christ picked up the whip
at the temple
and went into the temple. Who did he lash?
I'm a fan.
Who did he lash? And I'm sure that Rev Mantey believes that Jesus Christ will come again. And if he believes that Jesus Christ will come again, he has a duty to himself to behave in ways which would not annoy Jesus to direct the whip in his direction. He has a duty to himself. Dividing God's house on the basis of NDC, MPP, CPP, and so on I am quite sure will attract the whipping prowess of Jesus the Christ. I wish today, I wish I was a man of God. I wish I had the power of deliverance. Unfortunately, I don't have. And if I had the power of deliverance, I would deliver the Right Reverend Professor Mantey. Somebody should deliver him.